Today, we're talking about podcasts, how to start one and how to grow one. To find out how, we reached out to Ryan R. Sullivan. Now, Ryan is a founder, producer, rapper, and full time creative. After leaving his job as a mechanic in 2018 to pursue podcasting, he found himself giving free advice on the topic. And this led him to create Podcast Principles, a boutique podcast launch company for brands and businesses. Ryan, happy to have you on the call today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to do this. And it was quick, man. I filled out the form. We got booked a call. We're here, man. So I'm excited. This is one of the 3 to 7 things that I'm obsessed with talking about. So
All
it's
right.
also the one that's ended up filling up most of my calendar. So here we are.
Cool. So we can obsess away together because for me,
Let's
as
do it.
somebody who doesn't run a podcast but is starting this interview series,
Hmm.
I've really enjoyed the process. And one thing that you've talked about, I've just been binge watching your stuff, by the way.
Oh,
And
man. Thank you so much. That really means a lot, though. Thank you.
I have to ask, like, how important is it when you're starting out to have a focus or a theme? And how can somebody find the right one for them?
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I look at it in a few different ways. The first way I look at it is I guess let's just choose one, right? So let's take the business perspective, right? Because not sure what your audience consists of, but I know you're super consistent. And I'm going to assume, since it's on LinkedIn, that there's a lot of business professionals, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, things like that. So in that lens, right, what I'm doing, let's use myself as an example. Actually, let's use Adam as an example as well. What you're doing is you're bringing yourself to the feed. What You can hire a ghostwriter. I could hire one, you could hire one, and nobody would ever know that it's not you,
Yeah.
right? But then when they get on a call with you, then you got to sell them. Then you got to do the thing, right? So I look at it the other way. I'm like, what can you do that no other AI, that no other person, that nobody or no thing could do for you? And that is video content and the form that I put it in, which is podcast. But I'm agnostic. I don't even think you need to do a podcast. You just said, I'm not a podcaster, but I'm starting this interview series. Okay, I don't care what you call it. It doesn't matter to me. It's
Yeah.
all about, again, the results, but those results are based on our goals, and those goals are based on, for me personally, the lifestyle that I want to live, right? So to wrap up that kind of question in that opening question, it's for me, all I want to do is be self-employed tomorrow. That's my only goal. And then within the business, I have 2 goals, right? Which is become the best podcast coach in the world and democratize all podcast knowledge, right? Take Alex Hormozy, for example. Some people listening might know him. He's trying to democratize business knowledge, right? I want
Yeah.
to do it for podcasting. So, anyway, when it comes down to it, me talking on this in the first 5 minutes of this podcast, somebody sitting there on LinkedIn who might not know me and is watching this, they now know me probably even better than if they read 5 of my text posts. So that's kind of how I look at it from the business perspective. I'll stop there, but I could keep going.
I was going to say you should, man, because I've recently kind of fallen into that conclusion as well, haphazardly, and that I was writing just crazy amounts on LinkedIn, putting out a bunch of text, running a newsletter, which we'll continue to do every day.
Nice.
But I also found, and this is something that my wife pointed out, she's just like, she and I have decades of experience growing companies, and you can write and you can show what you know, but there's something to be said for actually getting on camera where people can hear your voice. They can
Yep.
hear the authority. They can hear that you've been there, you've done that, and you know exactly what you're talking about. And that's
Hmm.
something that, unless you are a pro writer, like I know many excellent ghostwriters,
Yeah.
shout out to Holly Crawshaw, speaking of which, if you're at that level, then you can help to convey that. But for a
Yeah.
lot of us, it's going to come across better in video format or at least in audio if you have a face like mine.
I was gonna say, man, no, you're good, man. You're good. You got the beard forming. It's not long enough, but
Look who's
yeah.
talking. Come on, man. Now you're just teasing me,
I
dude.
was
I
gonna
got beard
say,
envy. I'm like 17 years older than you, and
dude,
my
all you
beard
gotta do
is
is
a
just
fraction of
wait.
that. Yeah.
That's all I did. But
Yeah.
no, man, it's true. And I mean, I'm not trying to, I play devil's advocate on all of my strategies, right? Like, I also post text. I wouldn't be here if I didn't post text. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It works so well. But if you do that, it's Gary V, right? It's and not or.
Exactly.
People ask, what should I do? Should I do this or this? Both.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do either neither or both, right? It's like you by asking the question, you already answered it, right? So that's kind of how I look at this. But yeah, I could go. I have data. Like that's the thing. I try to. now being a little bit further in this business, a little bit further in life too, is try to appeal to all personality types, right? Because you have the emotional person or the person that might connect with my story from mechanic to business owner, right? Cool. Or you might have somebody who doesn't care about that. All they want to know is how many podcast listeners there are they growing, and is there a market for it for me? They just give them the numbers, right? So that's what I've tried to do, at least in podcasting, is just be the person that I didn't see. I didn't see anybody talking about why 70% of podcasts fail. I didn't see podcast producers talking about how there's 450 million podcast listeners. That seems like an easy selling point. So I was like, I'll just talk about that, you know?
And it's a good one. All right. So 70% of podcasts fail. Walk me through how you would advise somebody getting started. How do they become one of those
Yeah.
30%?
Yeah. So back to that really focus, I think the first thing is you have to understand that you're going to become the person that does this. What I mean by that is that you're going to become a podcaster. So it's not that you come up with a good podcast idea and then you start recording and then you put it out and then people listen. That's just like the on paper version. In
Mm,
reality, it's your kid has to do this has a sports event that's going to take up the whole weekend and you're not 2 episodes ahead. So now on Friday night you're squeezing out an episode that's not really that good, and then your editor is on vacation for 4 weeks in the middle of May. Who goes on vacation in May? That makes no sense. Like, that's real life, right? So I think people don't understand that. So first of all, podcasting is like anything. You can write your newsletter, you can have a podcast, you can run paid ads, you can learn any skill. It'll work, right? Podcasting is just one of them. I'm biased towards it. I think it's the present and the future, right? But anyway, back to it. Where do you start? You start with what's the thing within your industry, what's the opinion that you base all of your beliefs and tactics around, right? So a lot of people don't know what that is. They don't even know. They've never even answered it. If you ask your client, if you have a client, what do I do best? Like, what's my thing? What's my it factor? Find somebody, I don't care if it's your mom or your client, that'll tell you that, right? And then that is the basis for starting the podcast, because the personality piece and the feeling is probably even more important than the information when you're starting, right?
mm.
So I think I think people overemphasize the information piece, and they don't realize that at the end of the day, is somebody going to listen to your B2B interview show that has the same conversation as the next B2B interview show? People don't have time. Like, nobody's going to listen to that. They're watching famous YouTubers, they're watching high level content creators, they're watching Netflix, right? Like, you're competing with all that. So, yeah, I'm more of a break the mold type of creator, where I look for how can we make this as entertaining as it is informative. And honestly, if you had to pick one, I would choose entertaining, just because there's a lot of general educational content out there around these subjects, but how can we add an entertainment piece or an entertainment value through our personality, instead of trying to change our personality to be like a content creator we saw who we're trying to copy, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people copy creators, and they copy creators that aren't even that good. So it's like, the thing that you're copying is the thing that you're going to become from that is not even is a version of a copy. Each version of a copy decreases in quality, right? So I'm not saying don't emulate. You have to emulate. When I started making music, I listened to Action Bronson, Joey Badass, like I listened to Pro Era, Flatbush Zombies. Those are my influences. So I rapped like them. I made
Hmm.
music like them. I made beats like them. But then eventually, same thing with podcasts. I saw Rogan and I'm like, I'm Rogan. 5 years later, no, I'm not. Right? Like, I'm still not Rogan. I'll never be Rogan. So yeah, I think that's where the beginner creator, the beginner podcaster has to start. Like, what's my little angle? What's my little niche? If you want to take over the world, great. But Mr. Beast didn't set out to take over YouTube. He didn't. He literally, if you go back to his videos, he made like Ray William Johnson type videos, and that's a callback to old YouTube. If anybody
I was
knows who
just going
that
to
is.
ask, who is that?
Yeah, Ray William Johnson is one of the original like almost like a Tosh, Daniel Tosh, like a Tosh.0 type YouTube show where he watches viral videos and then like commentates on them.
Gotcha.
And that's what Mr. Beast did. Like, so, and now Mr. Beast is where he is now. And so, yeah, I think the emulation is cool. Find what's working in your industry, but totally nail down, just make a decision. Like, this is the type of show I'm going to do because I don't see it in this industry. And maybe I don't get to talk about 7 out of the 10 topics I really want to talk about, but your ticket is getting really good at talking about the 3.
I love that. I think there's a great example of that. The focus on the entertainment, not just the information. There's a book called The Goal, which is a book about manufacturing and operations,
Sounds
B2B or
exciting.
yeah, exactly. Right. Real snooze fest. But it's like very B2B, which like I've heard you say before, it's like boring to boring.
Yeah,
And
that's my definition.
so the book, The Goal, it's actually a novel. It's a business book, but it's written as a
Wow.
novel. And is it like an award-winning novel? No, but it conveys some big ideas in the form of a story about a guy who's in a business and he's struggling with it and he's got problems with his wife and they just all these like complications occur, but the lessons, they're definitely there. And one thing that really stood out to me was that you can read a ton of business books, but I will never forget the story of little fat Herbie walking along in The Goal and like how he got
Yeah.
trapped on the path. It's just shit
Because
like
they
that.
created a narrative, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, they woven into the narrative the lessons. Yeah,
All right.
that's
So
it.
going back to somebody who is either starting a podcast or looking to grow theirs, like what is the sequence that they should go into? Let's start with the beginners. What
Yeah.
is the 5 to 10 steps somebody should do before they even launch that first episode?
Yeah, so I would have at least 5 to 10 episodes before you launch anything too, just as a caveat. What we start with is concept and content strategy. Those are kind of one and the same, but if you look at the concept, that's what we just kind of talked about, the personality, the angle, the format. Format's huge. You can have all the pieces in place, but if you don't have the right format, it's not going to work, right?
Talk,
So,
talk to me more
yeah.
about that. What are the different types of formats?
Yeah, so we have what was very popular, especially in COVID, like when I came into this 2020, was the interview show, right? Like people just get on Zoom, we're bored, let's interview people. And then that created a lot of like very basic interview shows. And then on top of that, you have, which I think um, became the new interview show, which is the co hosted show. And this is something I'm really pushing these days, which is you do half of the work, you have 2 personalities instead of 1. You just everything. I mean, if you think how many there's no talk shows with 1 person. That's not
No.
a talk show, right? So, yeah, it's like using that model. You also have the solo, which I do. I create solo podcast episodes. Been doing it for about a year now. That's difficult, uncomfortable, hard to script, hard to memorize. Like, so I would say, I think if I were to give somebody advice on the format, I would say just don't underestimate the co host. And within the co hosted show, um, you can have a co host interview the other co host, and then each week you go back and forth.
Hmm.
And so that's a strategy I've seen. There's a podcast called Two Bobs. It's by Blair Enns and David C. Baker. It's one that I use all the time. The only reason I use that one all the time is because there's no other show that I've seen that does a great job with a co-hosted format. And that's what they do. Each week, one co-host interviews the other one, and they've done it for 180 weeks now. And so, yeah, that's the. I think co-host is the new interview show, but I won't leave out the solo. I won't leave out the narrative podcast, the scripted podcast. Those are all good. I just don't. Most people are just not going to tackle that.
Got it. Okay. So we've talked about the different formats. What would be the next step once you've found out the right format for you?
Yeah, so then what we do is we go ahead and draft your description, which then becomes the seed for your intro. And the reason why this is important, the few things that are very important are your branding around the show, your logo. The logo is the only visual piece that you get to use to sell your show other than the video version. So that's very important, right? So the show logo, is it going to include your face? Is it not? Is it too many words? Do we have the in the beginning? Do we have podcast in there? Do we have our names on it? Well, there's 2 names. Well, now that's 4 extra words on the logo, right? This is all of the things that we have a lot of experience in terms of trying to figure that out. Then in terms of the description is not just the description. It becomes the actual elevator pitch for your show. So
Mhm.
somebody bumps into you on the street and they go, "Hey, what's your podcast about?" Then you have that 2 sentence description and then once you tell them, they either know this is for me or it's not for me. So that's the goal of that. And then we have a question framework that we go through to answer all the questions that then we'll put into the description. We'll take that description, we'll kind of whittle it down to what's important, and then we'll basically train that host on how to do the spoken version of that description, which is the podcast intro, right? So a few things within that, though, if you're going to do this yourself. First of all, why would somebody listen to this? You're selling them on this. Again, people are watching Netflix. This has to be valuable enough for them to listen to it, right? Then who is that person? Is this, this is a business podcast. All right, well, you already lost. What business? How big is the business? How many employees do they have? Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they in their 40s and 50s? Have they had one exit, five? Like, let's get as specific as possible. We can always back up from there. Then what can the listener expect to experience? Right? So can they expect interviews? Can they expect a 2.5 hour episode, or can they expect a 15-minute short bite while they're on their walk? Right? So those are a few key things to make sure you include there. And that's the reason why I'm using my framework is because it's a framework. So, that's just what we've used, right? And I just think that regardless of if somebody worked with us or not, I literally give people our framework and I'm like, here, just go in this order. YouTube it all, but at least just go in this order. So then you'll have a systematic way to do it. And just to allude to the next steps, then it's distribution and technology. How do I distribute this? What platforms am I on? What size is my YouTube background? What other brand assets do I need? How do I tell the difference between a download and a unique listener? Right. Then from there, it's promotion. What platforms am I using? How am I using them? How am I promoting it? And then 5, it's launch process. So basically launch preparation.
Interesting. So if you're thinking about let's talk a bit more about the format. So you'd mentioned you could do like a 2.5 hour piece or the 15-minute bit that somebody would be doing while they're enjoying a snack.
Yep.
How would you find the right cadence that works for you?
There's some testing for sure. So there's a little bit of you don't really know until you get in there. But I think it all comes back to the goal. It all comes back to what do you want the person to learn from your podcast, and then what do you want them to learn from this episode. Let's use the reason why I hate using big creators and big podcasts as examples because they're typically terrible examples, but they're good examples for certain points. Andrew Huberman, right? Huberman Lab. Let's look at Huberman Lab's logo. If you're on a computer right now, not driving, not walking, go to your Spotify and look up Huberman Lab and look at the logo. You'll see it looks like this. It's Andrew Huberman staring at you, right? Why? Because that's what the podcast is. The
Mm.
podcast is Andrew Huberman looking at you and telling you things for 2 hours, right? Now, he does 12 hours of prep for one episode. And then he has an entire team of like people who run Ironmans that like put together all this research, right? So there's that. But that works for Huberman because he built a brand before he launched the podcast, right? And so it would be a harder sell if he was Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist with 0 followers. Now that 2 hour podcast is a little bit more difficult to get off the ground. So if you're somebody who's like us, who is 0 to 50,000 followers, maybe starting to get known online, but not out in the world, then that's when probably something shorter, less intimidating is going to appeal to you. But anyway, to wrap that up, the average podcast length is 30 minutes. If you want
Nice.
if you want the average.
So the whole notion of podcasts in general is still like a foreign concept to me. So I really wanted to have you on the call today just to like talk through it. One thing I do know really well is newsletters, and with newsletters, it's a
I
very
was going to
similar
say that's
approach.
a foreign concept to me. So
Yeah, well, there you go. But it's the approach
perfect.
is very similar. Like once you figure out your format, you want to figure out your delivery. And if
Yep.
you're sending a daily email, okay, do you want to do a daily email where it's just like one kind of idea or one tip, or are you going to do like a news blast? And like once you figure that out, it all kind of, coalesces.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get that chance. You're not going to nail it right out the gate. You have to just experiment with different formats, different forms, and see what works and what doesn't. One thing that I'm super bullish on is just video in general,
Yep.
because one, it's super cheap to do. It's easy to do. It's a fun way to actually get out and talk with human beings, which is kind of a
I know.
thing.
Yep.
Um, But also, what I've really come to appreciate about it is that you can take a piece of video, you can slice and dice it, and you can put it in lots of different places very easily. And anybody who uses like text on social media probably knows it's a pain in the ass to try and use the same text in like LinkedIn, X, Instagram, like take your pick. Like as a medium, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And they all have these kind of arbitrary, character counts, or the formatting's a little different. And it's really a pain, but a video is a video is a video. And
Mm.
you'd mentioned earlier about the distribution. What distribution channels do you look for and recommend?
Yeah, I mean, your standard for your podcast is going to be your Spotify, your Apple, and then 20 plus other platforms that I don't think many people use, but the people are downloading them there, so we'll use them. That's, Pocket Casts and iHeart, and Google Podcasts is no longer. They don't have that anymore, because YouTube is taking over Google Podcasts. But yeah, so those are the audio ones, just your big ones. It's free to do that. Spotify for podcasters.com. Have fun, put your podcast out there. If you want a free version. I use Captivate.fm. Been using them for years. I can host unlimited amounts of shows on there. They're just great. I love them to distribute the podcast. That will create what's called an RSS feed. And that RSS feed is what takes your podcast audio and sends it to all those platforms. And this is just the audio. Now for the video version, YouTube, right? That's a different game. If you're posting the same thing on YouTube as you're posting on audio, there's no question why it's not working on YouTube. Because YouTube, you're playing a different game.
Yeah.
Now, if you try to post, an unedited 60-second clip of a podcast on TikTok, that may work, but it may not work either because, again, different game, different strategy, right? So yeah, I mean, in terms of distribution, your standard audio platforms, then your video, fully long form video on YouTube. What I do as an example is I'll record a 20 to 30-minute video. I'll cut that down to 5 to 10 minutes for the YouTube version, and then the audio version will be 15 to 20 minutes. But there's logistics involved in that, right? So there's like my show notes writer, Jack, he has to create different show notes for each version, different timestamps for each version, right?
Yeah.
And so then my clip editor, we're going to go back and forth on, which clip do we think is going to work for LinkedIn, and, clips that work on LinkedIn might not work on YouTube. So yeah, you can go in the rabbit hole of all these different platforms, but like to make it simple, it's like long form episode, audio edit, that long form episode cut down to only the things that really matter, 5 to 10 minutes, YouTube. That YouTube video version gets cut into 5 to 10 or as many different video clips as you want to make. That gets posted on LinkedIn. Vertical versions can get posted on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Instagram Reels. And then the transcribed version of the long form audio can be made into whatever you want, blog posts, LinkedIn posts, things like that. So that's kind of like how this can be used in one podcast, can be used in 7 different ways.
Got it. So that sounds simple in theory, but probably complicated in practice. What tools or other approaches do you have to really streamline that further? Like how do you get the transcriptions? How do you break down the video into smaller clips? And how do you distribute them?
Yeah, so I would use first. Let's start with recording. I would use Zencaster to record interviews. The reason why is because this Zoom call that we're recording this on is going to a server, and then it's coming back. Zencaster is going to record locally. I like Zencaster over Riverside. Riverside does the same thing. I just don't like them. For my own personal reasons, you can use whatever platform you want. So I'll do Zencaster for the recording. From there, I'm going to take that long form video. Zencaster has a feature, I believe, where they'll put it together for you. Then this is if I could DIY everything. This is not my process. This is just
Mhm.
what some of my clients do. Then I'm going to put that in Descript. Descript's going to allow me to edit the video and the audio at the same time using the transcription instead of the video.
Oh,
So now it's going to make
huge.
my life so much easier. Yeah. So then I'll edit that. I'm going to use their little mixing and mastering features, one click mix and one click audio master, right? Just to get something presentable. Then I'm going to take that long form video, upload that to YouTube, take the audio, pull the audio out, upload that to audio. Once I put my intro and outro on it and I did my cuts, then I'm going to take that video and put it through Opus.pro, which is going to create clips. Again, this is if you want to use all tools, all AI, all DIY, no like professional grade softwares. Then the Opus clip is going to create as many clips as I want, right? Then from there, I'm going to use castmagic.io. What that's going to do is going to transcribe, and I have affiliate link too with them. It's going to transcribe my podcast. Zencaster will also transcribe it for you. That's going to transcribe my podcast, and now that gives me ChatGPT for my podcast. So I can tell Castmagic, hey, Castmagic, please make show notes in these different formats. Please create a 1,000 word blog post based on this transcription, etc. So that's what the beauty of Castmagic. And then, yeah, then I'm going to pop over on Canva. I'm going to mess around, create my YouTube thumbnail, maybe create a square thumbnail for the audio versions. And then I'm going to create essentially my media assets for that episode, which is your clips, your graphics, all that, and your LinkedIn posts or your
Woo,
social media posts. Yeah.
man, I'm tired just thinking about that.
I was gonna say that's why I do that's why I talk about this. Like I mean that's why I have a business. Like we do all that, right? So
For sure.
I'm not even advising people to do that. If you want to, I mean I've done it to get to this point, but I've also created a business that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, I definitely see the value that you provide there because my head is spinning, even just talking about the tools. Like I've
And I haven't looked at a piece of paper. I don't have any notes in front of me. Like this is all off the dome, It's like it's a lot.
just freestyle advice, man. I love it.
For real, man.
So, random question. You and I have kind of a similar background in that we both started in hip hop before we actually made the transition over. How's your experience as a DJ and a rapper helped you in podcasting?
Well, I've realized it's made me very good at commenting on LinkedIn because it's all freestyle shit. Like it's all
Yeah.
just a random opinion, right? It's made me much better at creating content. The pressure, just the creativity. I realized that I'm flexing my muscle by creating content on LinkedIn, So that's like has taken away a little bit of the time of me creating my music and my art. But yeah, man, I mean, being on stage will help you in everything in life. There's nothing that's helped me with sales and vice versa. So being able to manage a crowd, having an audience online is not the same. Like even having a podcast, you don't really have an audience. You have a ton of individual people listening to you at different times. So for sure, there's a ton of overlaps, man. But I think the creativity piece has been the one that's just worked for me. Whereas like by 25 years old, like I know that I can successfully market and sell and all these things. And that made it a lot easier for sure. So I think, yeah, man, I mean, there's so many overlaps. It's crazy, but that's awesome. What was your like, what about you? Do you see crossovers as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think the two obvious ones would be you learn to appreciate the power of iteration because if you're on stage, whether you're performing or if you're like freestyling, if you're doing like battle raps, like however you want to do it, you're going to be in front of a whole lot of people and you're going to be making up 99% of that stuff as you go. And you're going to be seeing that feedback like this. And that's amazing because you can learn so much from that approach. I know a lot of copywriters used to work in like stand-up comedy or they follow a similar process. Like if you're a comic, if you're Chris Rock, you're not going to go out to a stadium and tell a new joke. That just is not going to happen. You're going to go to 100 different clubs in 100 different places and you're going to tell that same joke and you're going to keep tweaking it, like a little word here, a pause there, maybe a certain inflection until it's gold. And you know that you could tell that joke and make people laugh every time. And so,
Man, it's fire. Dude, if you
speaking of
want
holding a
to,
mic, just
yeah, there you
just drop the mic after that. But
that
yeah,
was a
so
mic drop moment. Comedians, though, they're the best to learn from, man. If there's anybody to learn from when it comes to content creation, like if you want to learn, if you are a B2B company, hire a comedian with 50,000 followers and see what they do for your marketing. Like, I'm just saying.
there was a show, I think it was called The Pitch. This was like probably 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I know the pitch. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So in my career, what I used to do, I'm retired now, but like what I used to do was I would go and look at websites and then redesign them based on user feedback and iterate accordingly. So taking that stand-up comics approach. So I watched the show The Pitch, which is basically like agencies pitching their services, and they'd have two agencies go like head to head and see which would win. And as somebody who had the data and had iterated, I watched their approach of just spray and pray. Like they would come up with the most nonsensical fucking ideas I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
But the one that really stood out, it's just to bring this all full circle, there was an agency that their bright idea was very similar to what you said. They're just like, hey, we're going to take the money that we're going to make from this and we're going to hire a rapper. And then the rapper is going to write the song about the client's product. And like what the rapper came up with, similar to like a comedian, it was like, it was totally fresh. It was totally different. It was totally original. And that was something that the agency couldn't do. And it just seemed like almost counterintuitive where it's like, we're not going to do the work. We're just going to hire somebody to bring in a fresh perspective. So I totally get that.
Yeah, that's the cheat code is the fresh perspective part, you know. Like that's what like if you can't do that, then you need somebody who can do that. You know, it's like there's no way around it. There's no cheat code to that. Like you either have it or you don't have it or you just wait for it to come. But that's why I don't resonate with the tech people, the tech focused founders or even the operating founders. Like I'm such a sales and marketing like new idea, new idea. I've like dude, my ideas folder in Apple is insane. Like there's probably much better business models in there than the business I run. You know, it's like, but that's the sweet spot, man. But if you don't have that, bring somebody in for an hour and they'll give you 13 of them. Just run with one.
I think that leads into the last question, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. If somebody is getting started out with podcasting or creating a video series or audio series, what would you recommend that they do in the next 24 hours?
Mm. Take notes. Yeah, listen to as many podcasts as you can. There's another side of this, which is, you know, the rapper Currency, right? He says, I don't listen to my music. You know what I mean? He probably has like what, 30, 28, 30 albums. So there's that, right? Like I don't listen to any other music or I don't even listen to my own music. But I think when it comes to podcasting, there's a argument to be made that you just going in with no prior influence is good. But I would argue that you going out and listening to probably podcasts that you would never listen to. Just text 15 people and be like, send me podcasts that like I wouldn't know. And then just listen to them. Go on here, I'll give you the ultimate cheat code. Go on Reddit and go to the podcast subreddits. You will find these podcasts that you've never heard of. I'll give you an example. It's called Your Favorite Band Sucks. Look up Your Favorite Band Sucks and then look up your favorite band and listen to the episode they did on your favorite band, and you're going to hate these guys. But I would have never found that podcast if I just stayed in my own LinkedIn world, right? So that would be my recommendation. It's not, I don't have a step-by-step guide for you. You know, you can watch my YouTube videos and you could try to start, but I would say like get that emulation, get that inspiration, find what you really like, and then you'll be able to in that see the gaps where you go, I like this, but I wish somebody was doing it this way. That's how you start.
I love it. Ryan, you have been dropping bars and gold. So they're actually gold bars today. I love
gold
it,
bars,
man.
baby. We'll take it, man. I need a couple actual gold bars, but
yeah, well, you're getting them.
I'm grinding for that. Appreciate
cool, man.
it, man.
Yeah, love having you on today. Where can people learn more about you?
LinkedIn's my main platform. I got the SEO on Ryan Sullivan now. I don't even
All
need
right.
the R, but
There's
it's
too
Ryan
many
Sullivan.
of them out there.
Yeah, I think I'm the highest followed Ryan Sullivan maybe on the platform. We'll see. So yeah, so I got SEO on that. Type in Ryan Sullivan entrepreneur on Google, it should come up there. Yeah, if you want to see me rap, it's SULLYBOP, Sully Bop. Just Google that, it'll come up.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely Google the name, then click on the result. That'll help solidify your SEO. And
yes, I appreciate that. Yep.
right on. Brian, it was a pleasure. I learned a hell of a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will too. Thank you so much for joining us.
Adam, thank you, man. This is really cool what you're doing, and we have a lot to talk about when it comes to podcasting. This is just the start, so appreciate you opening the convo.
Nice one. Thanks so much.
Got it.